Today we're getting into two more love languages, quality time and physical touch.
Woohoo! Let's get into that.
Hi, I'm Andrea.
I'm Nathan.
And you've joined us for Marriage Monday on Marriage by Design. Marriage Monday is a time where we talk about how God designed marriage, what we see in the Bible for what he calls us to in marriage and how we apply that to our lives.
That's right. And this month we're talking about the 5 love languages. It is a book that was written by Dr. Gary Chapman. And it is a book that compares the way that people receive love and kind of uses languages as an analogy for that. So we've been talking the last couple of weeks about his general premises in the book about love languages. What are they? How can they impact you and your spouse in your marriage? Then last week, we started talking about the specific love languages. We talked about words of affirmation, and we also talked about receiving gifts. 2 very important love languages for everyone to know how to speak. This week, we're going to talk about 2 more. We're going to talk about quality time, and we're going to talk about physical touch. So the way that we've kind of set this up is we're going to kind of intro each one of those love languages. Mm-hmm. And then after we intro, we're going to talk a little bit about the dialects. So if you remember what we talked about the last couple of weeks, dialects are specific ways that this love language can manifest itself in you or your spouse. So with like words of affirmation, we talked about words of encouragement, we talked about kind words, and we talked about humble words. Right, so you can go back to last week and check that out. But this week we'll talk about those dialects for quality time and physical touch. Right. Then after we talk about the dialects, we're going to talk a little bit about some examples and kind of practical advice with regards to that love language. And then we will move on down the road.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Lead off.
All right, so let's get into quality time first.
Quality time, you got it.
So quality time is kind of obvious, as most of them seem to be, but it's spending good time with your spouse or with anybody, but with your spouse. It's not just time. I mean, we all can spend just time with our spouse, but there's a difference between quality time and time, right? So when Nathan and I are sitting and scrolling through our phones, but we're together, that's not quality time.
Right.
We're doing something separately. We just happen to be together. So there's, difference between quality time and just time together. And that quality time is what's really building your relationship. It's intentional usually. It's something that's helping to, over the long run, build your relationship. Yeah,
I mean, I would say that this is the name of the love language makes it obvious what it is, but I think this is one that a lot of people miss. Because I think a lot of people spend a lot of time together and assume that time is bringing quality to their marriage, but in fact it's not. Mm. And so, while this can be an obvious, I think people forget the quality part and just hear the time part, or the 2 spouses have very different beliefs about what is quality when it comes to time. And so, you might think, hey, we eat dinner together and then we go watch TV together every night and we're together for hours and it's great. We go to bed at the same time and, we're good on the quality time piece. But meanwhile, your spouse might be feeling like this growing divide in your marriage because you're like, well, we're doing tons of shoulder to shoulder stuff where we're both focusing on the TV or a movie or whatever, and meanwhile we're not getting any closer in our relationship.
Right. Yeah, and or it can be we're running the home together, we're doing the operations together, but is that really growing you closer? So again, quality time is a lot of intentionality. Nathan and I spent a lot of time today with our kids and it was really great, but for the 2 of us it wasn't a lot of quality time. It was quality time with our kids, but for the 2 of us it wasn't quality time, even though we were together all day and we great, and we were kind of a team all day, but it
Totally.
wasn't really quality for the two of us.
Sure.
So
It was good, but it wasn't what we're talking about here.
right. So different dialects then.
So what do you got?
So different dialects can be quality time. So there's kind of two: quality time, which is more like undivided attention,
Okay.
right? And then quality activities,
Okay.
which is maybe not undivided attention. So let's talk about quality time, undivided attention.
Okay.
That is, you're paying attention to your spouse. You don't have other things going on. That for us, honestly, that can be hard with the phones, and not getting into those or checking something on that or whatever, but really just putting that down, not having any distractions.
Sure.
And listening to each other when the other person is talking. So if we're having a conversation, and the quality part of that is listening to that other person for understanding, not listening to try to think of what do I want to say or how can I fix this, but listening for understanding, and just trying to spend that time hearing your spouse, understanding them, trying to better know who they are, and also then when it's your turn, trying to impart onto your spouse more about you and what you think and how you feel, which is important to know those things. And usually with people, there's people who are more talkative. The book calls them babbling brooks. And some people are much less talkative. The Dead Sea is what they call that. And so you may have one person in your marriage who just talks. There's nothing under the sun that's unknown with that person. Everything that they think of kind of comes out their mouth. And then the other person is probably a great listener and knows so much about that person, but maybe is less known. Maybe the Dead Sea one is less known. Maybe they don't even know themselves very well. So in those two circumstances, maybe trying to find a middle ground with that. Having the babbling brook talks about the important things, but then leaves time for the Dead Sea person to maybe process and talk, and asking questions of that person, that Dead Sea person, for understanding.
So what does that look like in our marriage? Which one are you?
Which one would you say I am? I'm curious what people would think that we are. So Nathan's more of he's not really a babbling brook, but he's definitely more the talkative one.
Oh, yeah, on the scale, I'd probably fall more on that side.
I'm way less talkative. I'm much less talkative than Nathan. And so for us, I'm happy to listen a lot to Nathan. I'm happy to hear his thoughts on things. And when I'm ready, I talk, or when or he may have to work harder at pulling things out of me. Do you feel like that? Do you feel like you have to work sometimes to pull things out of me?
Mm-hmm.
But he's also learned to be really patient with that too. So we may have a conversation about something really important. I don't have a whole lot to say, but then I may come back to him a day or two later and have a lot more to say once I've had some time to really think about it. Because words are important to me, and I don't talk a whole lot if it's not worth saying, and sometimes it just takes a while for me to wrap my brain around something. So yeah, he's good about being patient with that too.
Yeah, and for us as more babbling brook folks, if that's you, learning to be what I call an expressive listener, where you're expressing that you're listening, right, without saying anything. And that takes intentionality on your part, because it can be difficult for us as more talkative individuals in the marriage to not always be formulating the next thing that you want to say. And so really making sure to use your nonverbal communication when your spouse is talking to let them know, yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm listening, and not getting really antsy so that everyone knows you're trying to say something or you're going to explode.
Yeah, not interrupting.
Not interrupting.
Super important.
That's key. Right. But just listening and making sure that you're engaged in the act of listening can be a really important thing.
Yeah.
And we all have quality time desires. So, we've talked the last couple of episodes that of these 5 love languages, everybody has all of them. Most people have all of them at some varying degree and at certain times in their lives.
Mm.
So in order for you to love your spouse as the whole person, we need to know how to speak each and every one of these. And this is one where everybody will run into problems at one point or another in your marriage about this, where you're not giving your spouse the undivided attention that they need and that they deserve.
Right. Yeah, so that's the kind of quality time, undivided attention part. And then there's quality activities.
Quality activities.
Which I find a lot more fun. I like doing things. So,
Yes, you do.
so quality activities are things that you do together that at least one of you wants to do, and the other person is, and that then the other person is at least willing to do, and you're doing them together. So this takes some intentionality as well, especially if you don't find a lot of things in common. Nathan used to say a lot about us, and it was probably true, that we didn't have a lot of things in common. And I think a lot of the problem with that is we didn't look for ways to find things that we had in common.
It's probably true.
We didn't say, okay, what are some new things that we can explore, that we can maybe find that we have in common? And instead we just focused on, what I know I like and what I know he likes, we just don't have in common. So if you're that way, start exploring some things that are new for both of you, and you might find you like them, or be more willing to enter into what your spouse is interested in, and you might find you like that. Nathan really enjoys board games, and I have always thought they're not really a big thing for me, but I've come to find out that I do enjoy them. I really enjoy a lot of, not all of them that he likes, but I enjoy a lot of them that he likes, and so we love playing that together. And those are some quality activities that we've done together. Yeah, those are fun. At least one person has to be interested, and then be willing to do that. And sometimes that's sacrificing for your marriage. Maybe it's like, I know I'm not going to enjoy this activity, but I know he is going to love it, and I'm willing to have quality time, sow into my spouse, love them in that way in order to grow our marriage. So I'm willing to do this, even though I know I won't like it, but that's okay, because I love loving my spouse and I love serving them in this way.
It's a good attitude.
So, and quality activities can be things like, of course they can be thrill seeking or board game type things, or going shopping or window shopping or dreaming at a furniture store or whatever. And they can also be things like I don't know if this was from the book or if it was from the Bible study series on this, but a husband really wanted his wife to go hunting with him. And what that ended up being was they spent all day in the hunting blind. I don't know that they even got anything, but it's totally silent.
No, she said they didn't.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They didn't say a word the whole time.
They didn't say a word the whole time.
She just sat there with him.
Because you're hunting, you have to be quiet. She just sat there with him.
All day.
All day. And then they were getting home, and he was like, that was the best day with you ever. Because she was with him.
She's like, we didn't do anything.
Right?
We didn't talk. We didn't do anything.
But she was with him. She was entering into an activity that meant a lot to him, that he loved, and he was able to be with his wife doing that. And even though they weren't successful in the hunting part of it, they were totally successful in the relationship part of it. And so it can be something like that too, where you're just doing something side to side. Maybe you feel like this isn't really doing anything for us, but it is, because there's a lot to be said for just being willing to enter into what your spouse wants to do and doing it in a loving way without a bad attitude.
That's good. So would you say you're more at quality activities or more undivided attention?
I am probably more quality activities.
Yeah, I would say that. I think.
Are you more undivided attention?
I think so.
Yeah.
We're very different, and I mean that's why I ask, because a lot of times when I think about these, I realize each time we go through this book or each time we do a study on this, how different you and I are in these ways. And I bring that up, and we'll continue to bring that up. We're going to have an opportunity to talk about that again here in a moment with regards to physical touch. But
sure.
So often we allow the devil a foothold in our marriage because we start to buy into the lie that my spouse and I are just irreconcilably different. And this has become such a lie that we have now given that as an official reason for why people get divorced. That exact word. And all that is a confirmation of what one or both of those spouses that are party to that divorce already believed, which is that because we are so different, this relationship is not reconcilable. And it's a lie. There are so many things Andrea and I are very different in, but yet the Lord has allowed those differences to become things of beauty within our marriage and not things of division. And I'm not sharing that because I think we're sweet. I mean, you can go back and watch or rewatch if you've already watched it, the story of our relationship, the very first month we started doing our podcast, to hear what a train wreck we made of it. So I'm not trying to say that we're sweet. What I am trying to say is that there is hope, right? If you feel like, man, my spouse and I are just, we're so different, the Lord could never put us in a position where we could both, one, have a functional marriage, two, be happy in our marriage, three, be used by the Lord within our marriage to love on others. That's a lie. He can do that, even if you're different, I would say, especially if you're different. And we're a walking testimony to that. So I just wanted to address that because, especially today, as we've been talking about this, I'm struck again by how different you and I are. And that's okay. We've found ways to sow into that and make that work to the glory of the Lord. And I don't know about you, but I'm happy. Like, I don't feel like, that's not the goal of our marriage, but I feel like within our marriage, we have a lot of fun. We do quality activities, but we also do undivided attention, and we found a good mix of those things, and it works. Right. So don't get discouraged if you feel like, man, we're going through these 5 love languages, and it just strikes us how different me and my spouse are. That's okay.
You're not alone. We are too.
That's right. And so are tons of couples.
Yes.
So totally. Right. Okay, so any practical advice with regards to quality time before we move on?
My biggest piece of advice is be willing to step into your spouse's world. So be willing to, with activities, be willing with a good attitude to explore activities that they're interested in, or with quality time face to face, or undivided attention type of quality time. Be willing to put aside your thoughts about that or your frustrations with that or whatever, and just try to understand them, try to hear them, and get to know them better. And I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, it's a good call.
What about you?
I would say focus on building good dialogue within your marriage, because undivided attention, part of the reason I believe that couples get it wrong in this is because it can be really uncomfortable to develop good communication and dialogue within marriage. So focus in on that early and often. And if you didn't, and now you feel like you have horrible communication, that's okay. right? It's not okay to have it. It's okay that you didn't do it from the beginning, because right now you can start focusing in on building good dialogue within your marriage.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, it is okay to do shoulder-to-shoulder things, right? It's okay to play a video game together, or watch a movie together, or sit on the back porch and do nothing together. Mm-hmm. Those things are all okay things. Certainly, quality activities is a part of what quality time is. You just don't want to do that at the neglect of that undivided attention piece either.
Right.
So just make sure that you're doing those. And the other thing is, just to make this super clear, undivided attention and quality activities, when we're talking about quality time, that's you and your spouse. So be careful about always doing things with your children and thinking, yeah, my spouse and I are having tons of quality time together because we're having quality time playing trains with our toddler. Well, that's fine, but the danger of that is that you're making the object of that quality time your child and not each other. And the danger you run into is building a child-centric home, which can be really devastating on a marriage.
Sure. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so the next love language we're going to talk about is physical touch.
Yeah.
So Nathan, tell us a little bit about a general idea of what this is.
Sure. So physical touch is when you touch another person physically.
Thank you. The end.
So I mean, look, physical touch, we know what that is generally, right? I think what we don't know is, or maybe can overlook, is how intimate physical touch can be. And I'm not talking about sexual right at this moment. I'm talking about physical touching can put someone on a mountaintop, can make their life or wreck their life.
Yeah.
And the example I want to use for this is, there are studies out that if you take an infant when they're born and you put them in a bassinet and you keep them warm and you keep them fed and they're in a clean place and you change their diapers and you do all of those things, but you do not touch the child.
Yeah, they have no.
Meaning hold them or kiss them or hug them. If all you're doing is the functions of life, that child will have what's it called? Will failure to thrive.
Yeah,
they can die. Because physical touch is that important.
That's crazy.
To a baby. It is crazy. In the same way, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you can think of someone right now who, as a child, their life was altered forever because someone used the intimacy of physical touch in a wrongful way. And again, I mean, obviously sexual abuse is a horrific thing. But I'm talking about someone whose dad just hit them, right? Or someone who was bullied in school by someone that physically shoved him into a locker, or someone that would get into fights regularly, or these kinds of things where physical touch was used. I mean, physical touch, as we're talking about it, means nurturing physical touch, but physical touch is a much broader category than just the 5 love languages. And so I always want to make a point right at the beginning of this to say, physical touch is we need to have an appreciation for how much control we have over another person when they're in a relationship where we can physically touch them, right? And again, putting your arm around your children and giving them a hug, or putting your arm around a child that's hurting, that you have a position of influence in, and giving them a hug, man, that can make all the difference in their life. And that's just a hug, right? Let alone with your spouse, the ability to be able to put your arm around them routinely and lift them up, right? In times of devastation, being able to support each other physically through the act of a hug, right? I mean, let alone the intimacy of sex and all the ties that sex creates within the marriage bond. So, man, physical touch, oftentimes I think this gets a bad rap a little bit as sort of the guy love language, right? Because physical touch incorporates sex. I mean, that's, if you're doing it correctly, sex does involve physical touching, and you can explain that on a later episode of the podcast. But my point is, that's a small subsection of physical touch, and so I think a lot of times this can be discounted when people take the test or they think about their love languages, because particularly I see this more in women. They think physical touch, that's always trying to end something in sex. Right. So I'm not really down with that.
Right.
And I understand that. But physical touch is a much broader category.
It is, yeah. So what are some of those categories or some of those dialects then?
So, I mean, we talked about physical touch kind of generally as an overarching thing. Really, we kind of have divided this into really two categories. And they're broad categories. I'm certain that you could narrow these down. But the two kind of broad categories that we wanted to focus on in the little bit amount of time that we have is non-sexual touching and sexual touching. Mm-hmm. And certainly within non-sexual touching, there's romantic, there's, polite, right? I mean, a handshake is a physical touch,
sure,
right? But we do that with tons of people we don't even know, right? Hugging, we probably don't do with a ton of people we don't even know, whatever. So there obviously are subsets of non-sexual touching. So, for non-sexual touching within the marriage bonds, I mean, I think oftentimes we miss out on opportunities to really so into the non-sexual touching piece.
Yeah. It's something that seems to be so easy when you're first together. Something that you think of or maybe don't think of, but just comes easily when you're first dating.
Yeah.
And then kind of falls away generally.
Sure.
As you're together longer, except in some cases where maybe that's high for both of you. Nathan has a brother, and he and his wife, they're both high on the physical touch.
You know who you are.
And they're always touching, and it's so sweet, and it's funny too.
Sure.
Because they will, they never need two chairs. They always just share one chair and a lap. They're always touching, and it's super funny and cute, and it's fun to watch.
Super sweet. It is. It is. And this is not something we give them a hard time about. So if you're watching this, we're not picking on you at all. But every time we're together with you guys, we think of the physical touch.
Yeah, and
you guys are like the poster children for physical touch.
And it's something that we talk about often when we're with them. Is it's a challenge for us, and so but for most people, physical touch is super easy in the beginning, and then it just kind of falls away.
Right. And
it's something that we could be better at for sure, especially me, with just the physical touch that doesn't take all my attention. The putting my arm on him, swiping his back when I walk by him, giving him a quick hug, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Things that don't really take all my focus or all my attention, but are just quick, hey, I'm thinking of you sort of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Or holding hands when we're together. We hardly ever do that. But we should, like this.
We're holding hands right now. Look at this. We're making progress.
But we should. We've been married so long that we don't think about it, but we should think about it.
Yeah, we should.
Holding hands and, choosing to be close to each other when we're together and all that sort of thing. Right. Even sitting next to each other if we're watching a movie, we should choose to do that just to bring the closeness in our relationship.
Right. Now, particularly guys, and I'll focus in on guys here for a moment, although I'm sure someone could certainly send me a message about how in their relationship these roles are flipped. But for guys in particular, you have to walk a balance here, because you always hear it said that that sex starts in the kitchen, right? That sort of moral of the story, where if you get involved in doing the dishes, that can lead towards the sexual piece of it. And similarly, not sexual touching oftentimes starts long before that with non-sexual touching, hugs and tender moments of physical caress and kisses and things like that.
Right, because then it doesn't feel like, oh, you only touch me when you want sex.
Right, but that's the fine line piece of it, is if you are only doing the dishes when you've made it clear to your wife that you want to have sex that night, or if you're only holding her hand in the afternoon because you want to have sex later that night, then it really can it goes from being sewing into physical touch and acts of service, which we'll talk about next week, to like taking withdrawals from the love tank of that person, even when you do those things. Because then as soon as you grab her hand, she starts going, okay, what, I see what you're angling for.
Right.
So how do we walk that fine line? Well, I think you've got to resolve in your heart that you're doing this as an act of service in and of itself to your spouse. Right? I'm holding your hand or loving on you because I just want you to know that I love you, and not because I'm angling to get something out of it. And that takes time, especially if you have kind of fallen into that trap of, I do a whole bunch of things around the house when I'm trying to get my wife to have sex with me. Or, I really pour on the non-sexual touching when I'm trying to get my wife to have sex with me. If that's been a pattern in the past, it's going to take some time to build that trust up. And ultimately, her response is her responsibility. So you continue to do that non-sexual touching and love on her. You continue to do the acts of service, as we'll talk about next week, regardless of the outcome. And you will eventually be able to bring healing to that wound that you've inflicted on your spouse and get things back to where she trusts that you're doing these things just because you love her, not because you're trying to get something out of it.
Right. Okay, so we have the first dialect, which is non-sexual touching.
Right.
And then that's it.
Nope.
Just kidding.
All right, go for it. Why don't you lead into...
No, so then the other dialect is...
So what is sex?
Oh my gosh. Let's turn the camera off. The other dialect is sexual touching. And there's so much more than just sex, of course. But it's everything.
Were we supposed to prepare a list?
What?
You said there's so much more than just sex. Okay, so
the sexual touching.
Sure, there is. Yeah, there is.
There's of course just sex, which is touching. But there's the things that lead up to sex, which could be foreplay, or it could be just a massage, which isn't, maybe that ends up leading into sex. Typically it's stuff that takes your full attention.
Right.
Something that you're really having to stop everything and think about. So, yeah, I mean, again, sexual touching is, of course, sex, but so much beyond that. And I would really encourage you, if you don't have a lot of sexual touching that is not just sex, man, there's a world outside of that you should take time and energy to discover.
Could
it's
not
great.
agree more.
It makes things more interesting, more fun.
Yeah, and I would say, I would completely agree with what you're saying, and I'd go even a step further to say, if you and your spouse are not routinely talking about sex outside of the bedroom, you're really missing an opportunity to pursue your spouse. And I don't mean talking like, hey baby, what are you wearing?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not talking about that type
That's
of talking
not a voice
about
I
sex.
want to hear again.
I'm talking about what can I do that would
That's
really be exciting for you?
Yeah.
What can we do to switch it up?
Or what do you
in our sexual
really
relationship?
love? What do you not love?
Right. What? Because that's exactly right. What do I do that you really love? What do I do that you're like, I'm not sure what that was, but we should maybe not do that anymore. Right? I mean, talk about these things, because that's one way to pursue sexual touching that doesn't even involve touching.
Yeah, right. You might find some ways that your spouse likes to be touched that you never knew. And
right.
then you have new things to do.
Exactly.
Which is great.
It's hugely important.
I feel like you just perked up in this episode.
Well, I've been waiting for ever to talk about that.
That's funny.
No, that's super important.
And the funny thing is, I mean, we used to not talk about sex, right? A long time ago, and now it's something that we talk about without feeling ashamed at all or embarrassed or whatever. It's a topic that we're very comfortable talking about. But for a lot of people, they're not comfortable talking about sex, which is funny because we're willing to be naked together having sex, but we're not willing to talk about it, which is just a funny thing. But where I would encourage you to start is to talk about sex after you've had sex. That seems to be the best time. You're both more kind of vulnerable and
the endorphins are
open.
Going most of the time.
Yeah, the endorphins. So the best time to kind of start going down that road may be just after you've had sex. And then you can say, hey, was there something you loved or didn't love, or something that I can do differently, or whatever. That's how we found when we first started down that road of talking about sex was the best thing is to talk about it afterwards.
Right. So I've made a habit of pointing this out today. So as between sexual touching and non-sexual touching, which would you prefer?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know. I'm going to probably surprise you, but I think I like them equally.
Really? Mm-hmm. That does surprise me.
Yeah.
Do you care to venture a guess on which one I like better?
Nathan likes sexual touching far and above non-sexual touching, but non-sexual touching is still important to you.
It's something that I've grown in, I hope, over the last, however, 6 or 7 years, because it is something that I certainly had fallen into the trap of non-sexual touching always leading to wanting to lead to sexual touching, and I really have abused that piece of it in our relationship and had really created some pain in your life with regards to that. So I've tried to really change that. One thing I wanted to point out about sex, and at some point we're going to do a Marriage Monday month just on sex.
Ooh.
Because this is something that can be you may be listening to this and going, y'all are crazy if you think we're going to try and reinvest in our marriage and sexual touching, because there can be a ton of pain there. There can be a ton of misconception within sex about, what's not okay, I have this stuff in my background and he doesn't know about it, or she doesn't know about it, or we tried to do this and things went poorly, or he or she did some things early on that I was not comfortable with and it's really affected this area of our marriage. There's a ton of things that can come into this whole area of sexual touching. For me, sex really boils down to a really important thing for each of us, and that is, do we go into sex with the idea of getting something out of it for ourselves, or with the idea of giving something through it to the other? So when we but what should be the focus?
The other.
Right. I mean, when you have sex, oftentimes both parties are getting something out of it. Mm-hmm. So that's not what I mean. I mean, what's your attitude? What's your heart attitude?
Sure, got it.
Right? Is the heart attitude, hey, I want to have sex because I want to get my rocks off and move on with my life? Or are you going into sex saying, hey, I want to prove myself as a lover to my spouse in a way that makes you think, man, I'm really glad have this guy to have sex with.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the focus when we move into sexual touching. And so often the root of sexual trouble within marriage is it becomes all about
focus on yourself. Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, I'd be happy if she'd do this act to me, or I'd be happy if she'd be more like this, or I'd be really happy if she'd lose this weight, or I'd be really happy if she was less inhibited in the bedroom, or if whatever. Right? Insert all of the things. Every one of those things has to do with me. And sex isn't about me. It's meant to be a full and complete giving of myself to you.
Yep.
So I would say if you want somewhere to start with regards to sex, sit down and really ask yourself, when I have sex with my spouse, or when I had sex with my spouse previously, who was I focused on? Was I focused on her/him, or was I focused on me? Anything else to add to that?
No, not right now. We're going to have a whole month on it. So I mean, there's a lot.
There is a lot.
To that physical touch, of loving somebody through physical touch. There's a lot.
Yeah.
In that. But as the months go by, we'll talk more about it.
Right. So I think that was probably my practical thing with regards to sex, is let's think about refocusing our mindset. Do you have anything practical you would want to, practical advice you want to give with regards to touching?
Mine would be more on the non-sexual touching, and just trying to add in a couple of those.
Sure.
Every day. It's hard to shift your focus when that's something that you don't really do very often, so it's hard to even just think about doing that frequently, but if you can just add it, shake in a couple of those every day, then it's a great place to start.
Right. So let me give you
habit.
Yep, so let me give you a practical one that you can do starting today, right now. It's simply this. Before you leave or head off to work, you have two things you can do. You can sit, right? Grab your spouse's hands, however you're comfortable, right? Holding hands, and then just pray over her, men, husbands, to start the day. Just pray for her day, pray for her work if she works, pray for her, if she stays at home, for guidance and wisdom, patience, joy with regards to the kids. Just pray over your spouse. If you would rather, then stand up and embrace while you pray for your spouse. And certainly, wives, you can then reciprocate and pray for your husbands if you want. But that's one way that you can add in some physical touching every day.
And quality time.
Boom. Nailed it. Anything else, baby?
Nope.
All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. And ladies, yes, guys, the royal guys.
I know you meant.
Thank you guys so much for being here, and girls. I so appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to what we have to say about quality time and physical touching. Guys, I hope that you have an excellent day, and remember, God is for your marriage.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.